Hello, and welcome to the LA Venture Podcast. This is Minnie Ingersoll, host of the podcast and partner at 10110. 10110 is a seed stage fund here in LA. All opinions expressed on this show by me and my guests are solely our own. If you are interested in LA Venture, go to 10110.net/podcast, where I've made a sortable list of all of the great LA VCs who've been on this show. Wes Nichols is hosting me today at the March Capital office. Wes is a partner here at March, where he sits on the boards of Disco, Suki, and Action IQ. Prior to March, Wes was the co-founder and CEO of the media analytics company MarketShare. MarketShare was a really important LA company that had a huge exit to Newstar. Before that, he was the founder of Direct Partners. In summary, he's one of the founders who really put LA on the map and set the foundation and culture of LA tech.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. You know, I first met you, I really didn't know all the history of your entrepreneurial journey, but maybe we could start there.
Sure. It's been almost the only thing I've known. I grew up back east in Maryland, and my dad was an architect and was very entrepreneurial himself, had his own architectural firm, so I got to live through the highs and lows of that.
But aren't the high highs and the low lows also just entrepreneurship in general?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. But being exposed to that it just sparked my interest, and I started doing things when I was a kid, doing car washes and setting up a carnival for neighborhood kids and just whatever I could do to try to turn a buck. It was something I was very interested in. And then McDonald's, which was fantastic. I loved the McDonald's training and the experience and the speed. And I got very good at predicting what people were going to order as they walked up to the counter. That was my parlor trick with my coworkers. So maybe an early analytics bent of mine. And then I started working in, other weird jobs, restaurants, servers, and you get good at understanding how to read people and also how to be in service to other people. Sure.
And we're going to talk about the fact that you voluntarily went through the police academy and all of that. But going to McDonald's doesn't train you to be the CEO of a huge company like MarketShare, or you sit on a lot of public company boards. I mean, how did you go from that to building these iconic companies?
Yeah. Well, I knew I was sitting at McDonald's and realized I wanted to be Ray Kroc. And it was like, hey, someone did this. I could do this. And so in a weird kind of naivete combined with arrogance or something as a teenager that, hey, maybe there's, anyone could pull off doing this if they put a lot of hard work into it. And so I was not afraid of work. And I think most people will attest to been a little crazed on that front. But I wound up joining a company that was involved in the launch of Capital One early on. And so I got very exposed to Capital One, worked closely with them. And they were one of the first companies to really embrace the use of data-driven decision-making. They had a whole orientation called information-based strategy, IBS. And the idea was everything could be done through data, that you could figure out who you're targeting with marketing. You could figure out someone's credit risk and therefore what to offer them, what rates to offer them, what their likelihood of default would be, things like that. So that just further connected into my weird brain around interest in analytics. And I told someone about this recently that I just even remember back in middle school, I started going to the library a lot and reading the books I would love to read about were airplane accidents and reading the NTSB and FAA reports on the breakdowns of these things. I don't know. I was always fascinated by what combination of variables lead to a particular outcome. It's kind of like the incident in the Titanic submarine. When they break that down, it's not going to be one thing. It's going to be multiple things that come together led to that accident. And so the same thing happens in now marketing. It's like it's a multitude of things that come together that drive a particular consumer behavior, and it's never just one thing. So I started off launching Direct Partners in the early 90s, and my background had been with the pre-internet was direct mail. So using database marketing and CRM to do this only through printed matter. So as soon as the digital realm started popping up, it became a no-brainer. I remember having my first Prodigy account in 1989, realizing I'm going to figure this stuff out. And so I created one of the first digital marketing companies that used, digital media and marketing to actually drive customer activity. So in that company, we helped launch DirecTV and Earthlink and XM Radio and TiVo and a bunch of really interesting, iconic technology companies. So I did that for several years before realizing that these CMOs and CFOs needed a tool that could tell them predictively and prescriptively how to spend their marketing money. And that had not really existed. And the things that kept coming up as digital marketing was starting to emerge was CEOs asking, why do I need to spend money in marketing? Steve Jobs asked that question of our team. And I was often the one to get asked those questions because of my analytic background, but then I didn't have an answer to that. So I found through my partner, my first company, an academic at UCLA and then another one at Wharton that were actually building those sort of models. And we brought them in, and it was amazing. It actually was able to answer the questions about resource allocation in a predictive and prescriptive manner.
And so the models were models of if you spend here, it'll drive these outcomes?
Yeah, it was all P&L outcomes based, not eyeballs or clicks or brand impressions, BS metrics. It's really about if I move this much money from TV to YouTube, how many extra iPhones am I going to sell? But it also, to get to that level of granularity, you need to go broader to look at 1,000 variables simultaneously. What's the weather effect? What's the economy? What's going on with competition? It's never just one thing. It's multiple activities. Like, regardless if you see an incredible ad for the brand new MacBook Air, no amount of marketing money is going to make you go buy that if you are fearful of losing your job tomorrow. Or
Right.
fuel prices are $8 a gallon. Like, that's going to have an effect on whether you're likely to buy something or not.
Were there any really weird ones, like the weather makes a big difference on whether I buy a MacBook Air or something?
Yeah, for soft drink companies, which I will go unnamed, we found that it wasn't temperature that was a variable, but it was humidity was a big variable. So we actually figured out a way that you could factor into vending machines humidity levels and do dynamic pricing of soft drinks.
Isn't that a classic business school case that people get pissed off if you do dynamic pricing or something?
Yes. But if they're thirsty.
Right.
No. I mean, another one that was interesting is with Roche, and it's public, so I can talk about it. But the pharmaceutical company owned Tamiflu, and they were doing budgeting based on the year before's business outcomes. So if you had like a weak flu season last year, and then you set your budgets for this year based on last year's flu season, and it's a different flu season, you're either over budgeted or under budgeted. Every year that was the game. So we used the analytic engine to look at all these variables simultaneously. We worked out a deal with Google to get query volume data that would allow us to understand what people were typing in for flu symptoms and where, by day, by market. And then the analytics emerged, it's like early AI that said, oh, well, one other thing you haven't seen is bus ridership and public transportation dips 2 days prior to people Googling for flu symptoms. So that's interesting. So people start to feel a little sick, they don't go to work, and then they wind up Googling flu symptoms, and then they get some sort of prescription.
Wow.
So by knowing that, and then we could start to say, okay, marketing team, now let's start to move money to these markets real time based on what we see are some of these driver variables at work, and then be super, guerrilla style in terms of how to go to market.
But just having the data and having the tools, I mean, that's evolved a huge amount. Do you have thoughts on where AI is now and how that's maybe changing the marketing landscape?
I think it's changing all the landscapes.
It is, everything.
Yeah, and I think we're in that era where, AI eats software. So, and that's why I'm here at March. I'm super excited about the focus that we have. We deployed hundreds of millions of dollars into generative AI way before it became a hot thing. So I think finding entrepreneurs with big visions and experience to pull this off, and then we're seeing some product market fit, and now we can pour the gas on with the relationships that March brings and the experience and the pattern recognition. That's where it gets really exciting. That's what I was looking for when I was at Market Share. When we were looking for investors, we talked to a bunch of people, and there's a lot of capital out there. But what I really wanted was, I wanted people who could help me with pattern recognition and, help me not. Look, I had a portfolio of one. Like that was it was all or nothing when you're running a company, and it's risky. I have a young family. I'm all in. I don't have a lot of money in the bank. It's a lot of pressure, and so. Could I have a team of people who could join as investors that could actually help me de-risk, help me find patterns and do things that avoid mistakes that others have made, and help me with introductions and help me with access, help me with go-to-market. And that's really, I got that. I got that with Roger McNamee and Ted Meisel, Elevation, and I got that with Sean O'Neill from Silver Lake, and they were critical. So they're my model for what do I want to be as a good director, and how do I help these companies that I'm very passionate about, how do I help them grow? One thing I did I've had 3 public boards, and one thing I learned in training of public boards is NIFO, N-I-F-O, nose in, fingers out. It's hard to do that as someone who's been an operator for a long time.
Right.
But those are the best board members. Those are the ones that understand enough what's going on in the companies, but aren't trying to grab the wheel and keeping their fingers out. So I try to practice that as well.
So then you went from being a very successful founder, CEO, to being a very active and successful angel investor.
Yeah, I started doing a lot of co-investing in companies, probably at the tail end of market share and then after running market share. And so I was able to get into some, interesting opportunities. SpaceX is the most exciting one.
Yeah.
Snowflake, early 2018 was a very good investment. And
Because you're a prominent founder in a prominent founder network, sort of.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been able to get a lot of access to things, look at a lot of different deals. I think Datadog has been a really good one, and Service Titan, but also some in biotech like Veer Biotech and weird ones like AppLovin, GitLab. Duo Security was a good one that was at Cisco acquired. So I've been able to have some good investing experience and some very good outcomes, but also, now doing this institutional with nearly $2 billion under management, it's a whole different game.
Wow, I didn't realize you guys had $2 billion. 100% agreed, though. It's a night and day, like your capabilities when you're by yourself versus with a firm and infrastructure.
That's right.
Yeah.
One of the things I'd say, that I have a good reputation of being able to see around the corners, and I do sometimes think 5 years out too much, but where's that world headed? So that's why I've enjoyed that, and that's why I've enjoyed just freelancing on the investment front. But I thought, I keep up with Jamie, and he's been a very close friend and one of my career mentors. I actually launched market share in Jamie's old office.
Wow. Okay. No, I'm interested in the March connection.
Yeah.
So it's via Jamie.
Yeah, exactly. Jamie's the glue, but that led to coming over and seeing what they were doing here, and just knowing what I know about Jamie and Samant. This seemed like a great fit for me, and I hadn't planned to go back to work full time, but it was a no-brainer because they really wanted to lean in on enterprise AI, which is my background.
I mean, what sort of surprised you coming over full time? What stands out?
What I really liked about March when I started digging deeper was not only the fund performance, which has been incredible. I mean, the HEC study that came out last week, I'll share that with you. It's very complimentary of how well March has done. And, I think that the team is very collaborative. It's a nice group of people, a lot of brain power here. And when we get together, we are looking at companies. We do a lot of homework on them. We put together a multiple page tear sheet on them that is shared to the team prior to meetings. And then we get in and we discuss it. And if it goes to the next level, that's when we get the founders to come in and zoom in or come in person and share their story and what they're trying to do. And then we make a decision after that. And like I said, it's very collaborative and everyone has a voice. And, I think Jamie and Samant have the most experience and incredible track record. So I think we really lean heavily on their experience.
Vote? Do you vote on companies?
No.
Oh, okay. We rate companies. We do
Yeah, no, it's less structured than that, but it's collaborative for sure.
Yeah. And are you seeing interesting trends or things that you're particularly excited by around in the AI world? You talked about marketing automation. I feel like with AI, all marketing is just going to be automated and it's going to be targeting. Gil likes to say, you're not targeting people anymore. You're targeting the AI that is deciding what to show them. Do you have thoughts on what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think as a whole, we've been excited about those areas that, as I mentioned earlier, are going to lead to cost reduction, lead to fortification of trust, through cybersecurity. But I think my thinking has been that the horizontal AI businesses are going to be the ones that be most likely to be commoditized. So we've been really focusing on the vertical apps that can be very defensible.
Do you have a good example of that?
Unifor is just on fire. Unifor is a multimodal AI, probably one of the larger AI companies in the industry now. And what they're doing is they're helping with call center optimization and customer experience. So they're listening to voice, sentiment and words being used. They're using tools in the background to help automate functions to help the person working the phones have a better experience for that customer.
Wait, so what's a good example of that? I'm the customer service rep and it gives me some insights?
It gives you tips on what you should be saying based on what that person is saying to you, based on what the customer is saying. Or in the background, I'm calling an airline and I'm complaining about a canceled flight. And in the background, Unifor is able to pull up and look at records and pull that information, surface it for the agent very quickly, or helps with rebooking, things like that. You think about the amount of money that's spent in customer service and the disdain customers have for that experience
Yep.
and the risk it provides. It is the frontline risk for whether a customer is going to churn out or not, is that touch point. So you better get it right. I just had an experience recently with Google, coincidentally, who's been usually pretty good, but I have a bunch of Nest cameras, and it's just been like pulling teeth to get anything solved. And, that's not great because I've spent a lot of money with them across a bunch of different products. But they should know that. They should see my lifetime value and then surface things, listen to my tone, listen to me getting a little heated, and maybe, come up with a solution that, like, hey, maybe send me a replacement for the dud that you sent me and, save a lot of trouble.
I imagine some people push back and say it's creepy, all this data. And it's not just data now, it's sentiment, right? So it's like, not only do you know everything about me, but you've got whether I'm, generally in a bad mood this day or this month or something.
Well, McDonald's has just launched an AI solution that can listen to your voice at the drive-in to see if you sound tired and offer you coffee.
Really?
Yeah. So, I think it's cool, personally.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm not a Luddite at all. I'm a big believer in improving the human experience. And I think part of that is if they can read some of my behavior or read I'm having a hard day and make it better, that's a good thing.
That's even where you started, which is like starting from getting to understand people, predict what they're going to order.
It's, I don't know. It's just people get weirded out about data and about privacy. But if you do as much work as I've done in this space, it's remarkable how predictable we are as humans.
That's interesting.
Yeah, we are super predictable. Where we drive, the routes that we take. People are, go the same places to eat. They make the same call. They watch the same TV shows. They're creatures of habit. And so we just happen to have the data to look at that and then see if we can then, predict
and influence.
And influence, yeah. I actually had the CEO of a large automotive company did an audit on market shares analytic engine 5 years ago. And I shared it at our company at an all-hands meeting because I want people to realize, what we're doing is meaningful. It's not just marketing spend optimization. It's like the ripple effect is enormous. Like this guy told me that we'd help sell an extra $1.5 billion of cars. Through the marketing optimization, it led to a new plant being opened up, which led to more jobs being hired. It helped their stock price go up. So then you think about all the people like, my mom and others who are in pensions that have stock in these companies, that helps their return. The ripple effect, if you get the analytics and the AI right, is enormous. And it impacts a lot of people for a lot of good. Mm-hmm. So that's the way I think about the power of this.
Yeah. I want to take a tiny tangent because you're talking about the impact that these have. And I know you've been involved with sort of geopolitical level, getting involved with our State Department or Department of Defense.
Yes.
I'm super curious how do you put that same lens on sort of those discussions and what are you advising when you're talking to generals?
Yeah.
What are your messages and what are you seeing there?
Yeah, no, for the past 4 years, I've been working with the military leadership as an advisor on analytics and AI. And it's the same story. Whereas business is focused on optimizing for revenue or market cap, the military is optimizing on readiness. That's the dependent variable, is readiness. And that means we have to be ready at a moment's time to act and to help defend the country. So that could mean, do we have enough, recruits? Do we have the equipment that's working and maintained? Are the troops getting enough training? Are they, are they battle ready? And so the opportunity to apply analytics and AI with these generals, in many cases, they're moving from running, a battalion to all of a sudden, being a CEO of a business within the Army or within the Air Force or what have you. So giving them guidance on here's the best way to start to use data to make better decisions. How do you do better forecasting? How do you do optimization, reduce paperwork? It's the same problem big companies have, but like the Army, I think it's a $180 billion budget and about 2 million employees. It's a big business. So that's been an honor to help. And I was just back at the National Security Seminar back east with them for 4 days talking about everything from readiness to geopolitics, what's happening with China, Ukraine, all the hot buttons.
Okay, I want to come back to geopolitics in China because I think it's really interesting. But on that, I know you went through the police academy and are a volunteer officer and you go on patrol.
Yeah.
And one thing you said to me about that was it's so striking what a totally different world it is.
Yeah, this was a something I've always wanted to do. Beyond being a DJ in college, my primary source of revenue, of income, was doing undercover security.
You're so badass now. I did not know you were a DJ in college or undercover security. Go on.
Great playlist. But I worked undercover in retail stores and an amusement park, just weird jobs back east. And I was good at it because, it's just observational skills that I have, and that's my pattern recognition. And I come from a family, my mom comes from a military family. She worked at the NSA. A lot of my family worked in military law enforcement. So I was, when you live in Maryland and come from that area, a lot of people are part of that. And so in high school, I had a weird event. This is probably TMI, but I had a weird event in my neighborhood, in my town, a little town in Maryland I grew up in, where we had a serial killer.
Oh, God.
And it's called the Mannequin Murders, which is a whole nother podcast. It literally is a podcast right now. And it happened, when I was about 12. It went on for 15 years, and killing our next door neighbors and killing people, my sister's best friend, stuff like that. It was a weird thing. And so I got a front row seat to how crime terrorizes communities. Mm-hmm. And not just actual crime, but this fear of crime.
Totally.
And so that just has really stuck with me, and I felt like I wanted to do something about it. So I got into the cadet program called the Explorer program when I was in high school. All through that program, I did that. I worked at the police department every week, and so I got my exposure to that. And that Explorer program was something that was really influential in me. So about 8 years ago, Jim Wyatt used to be at William Morris and as a friend, and I saw a LAPD badge on his lapel one day at a meeting, and I asked him what that was, and he said, he's on the board of the police foundation. I'm like, I want to get involved in that. I want to help give money to the Explorer program because that had such a big effect on my life. And as I learned more about it for LA, it helps 600 kids in LA and primarily South LA. Like, it changes the lives of people. And so to get them involved in doing some good and doing something community-minded as opposed to doing something for themselves. And I learned about the reserve police force at LAPD. And I'm like, that sounds cool. And I talked to 3 of my friends who did it and did some ride-alongs. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. So I applied. It took a year to apply. It's like a 3 or 4% acceptance rate. It's really a hard process to go through. I mean, the mental evaluations, physical, the 5-hour polygraph. I mean, it was a really wild experience.
Wow.
But I went into it and went through it all, did fine. The hardest part was the legal. I mean, it's 4 months of legal.
Legal,
like law, like understanding understanding about all the amendments and
you had to learn all the laws.
You have to. Yeah. If you're trying to understand if a crime's been committed, that was really interesting. So I did that that's on the weekends and in the evenings. So I did that, and then I decided to go into patrol, and so I've worked basically one shift a week since I started doing this for about the past 3 years. And so
it's a huge time commitment.
But I do I like Friday nights. I work Friday nights, and in Hollywood right now, and it's wild. I mean, it's just but it feels like you're helping. I mean, my partner and I've helped. I think it's either 4, maybe 5 people. Yeah, four teenagers and 1 adult were in the process of committing suicide. We were able to talk them out of it real time. We caught our first home invader. As a couple woke up and there was a man staying at the foot of their bed and terrorized a 10-year-old, kind of similar to what I went through as a kid. And I was able to talk to the girl about my experience as a kid, and that you get through that and it's okay. And we checked every corner of her house and let her know everything's okay. There's no one else there. But you're touching people on their worst moments, and it's very humbling and it's an honor. I mean, it's to go into do a death investigation and talk to their family about the person who's dead, laying on the floor, like their loved one, or laying in bed after a long life. You're helping them. Every death investigation LAPD has to go to make sure it wasn't a crime. And then you help them with getting a death certificate signed off by a doctor. You get the mortuary lined up to come, and you're there with the family supporting them. Like it's super intimate. It's a very unusual thing to do, but it feels, for me, I felt like I've spent, I've been a member of YPO for a long time, no longer in the Y part of it, but but YPO has this thing called this idea of the success to significance, and that we're all under this pursuit of success for so long, and I feel like now I'm really focused on significance and how can I help, and how can I help the community. I also have been working with the department for the past 4 years about technology adoption. How can we streamline the paperwork And the Chief Moore and the Police Foundation have been raising money to help completely change the technology stack. When COVID started, most of the police stations didn't have Wi-Fi, so they couldn't do Zoom.
What?
Yeah, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we put Wi-Fi in. Like the foundation funds crazy stuff, like all the children's sports programs in South Central. There's no budget for that, so the foundation pays for that.
Putting a link for a donation. I wrote down. You need to include the link for the foundation.
It's a really good cause. And
Yeah.
It's a really nice group, and it's doing important work.
Going through and thinking about how do you de-escalate these situations. Yeah. What have you learned about yourself going through this whole program?
I learned that the skills of entrepreneurship and dealing with customers and dealing with humans in general is really helpful, and age is helpful. The one thing that the department likes about the reserves is they tend to be older, and they tend to have more time under their belt, used to dealing with people and like to talk to people. And as a result, that leads to a de-escalation that maybe if I was 21 years old and a little coming in hot, that might be a little different thing.
What about lessons from your entrepreneurial journey when you're working with entrepreneurs, when you're sitting on boards? Do you have ways you take in some of those learnings and apply them to entrepreneurs, things you're find yourself repeating?
Yeah, no, it's really important. I have an immense amount of empathy for entrepreneurs.
Amen.
Like I look at it it's like being a parent. Like you can't know what it's like to be a parent unless you've been a parent. Mm-hmm. And you can't know what it's like to be an entrepreneur without being one. And it's hard. It's stressful. It takes a very weird person to power through the ups and downs of this. Particularly, if I feel like some people have come out of very large companies and start to try this, they have no idea how hard this is. And I think that's, 90% of startups fail? I mean, I think half of it is probably just people don't realize how hard it is.
I was at Google most of my career, and then I started a company, and someone said, Minnie, it's like you're a domestic animal. You've been domesticated. And
that's great.
And you don't just take the dog that lived in the living room and put them out into the wild.
But you had a little feralness, apparently.
Yeah. So well said. Thank you. Wes, how do your friends describe you?
That's a good question. Let me think about this.
It's my last question.
I'd say my friends probably describe me as ambitious and honest and funny. I think if I had to categorize it, I am a comedy nerd. So when I'm not listening to your podcast and others, I consume a ton of comedy. I go to live comedy. I'm
so fun.
Really into that, and I just always try to find humor in things.
Do you get up on stage?
No.
Just checking. I'll
do karaoke with you though.
I was at karaoke last night.
Let's do this right. You got these microphones right here. Let's
Wind
beneath my wings now.
Okay. Gaslight tonight. Wonderful. Well, Wes, congratulations on your very impressive career. And thank you for taking the time to do this with me.
Thank you. I love what you're doing, and it's really nice for the community.